So welcome everybody again. Thanks for joining the INSEAD Innovation Club, part of the INSEAD Alumni Belgium. This is probably the fourth event. We are looking at listening to innovators, asking questions, hopefully inspiring the community and also learning things that we could apply in our own companies. And also feel free to reach out if you have any suggestions. We'll post in the chat the address of the website on the inseadalumni.be. We have a LinkedIn group as well. So please join the community and let's come up with some interesting topics that are useful and inspiring for you. So today we'll talk with Laurent and Oana. Oana is the head of open innovation at Hype. Many of you are familiar with the company. And Laurent is a serial entrepreneur now running artificial intelligence-based solution for startup scouting. So the theme that unites us is the use of technology platforms or processes, let's say, to institutionalize innovation in a company. We all know that startups usually are native, let's say natively innovative, whereas for corporates, we need a steady process, tools to not just a shift in mindset. So the wheel, it's more difficult to turn. But anyway, we'll have Oana starting. She'll present her work in about 10 minutes. And then I hope we'll have a very interactive session. I expect if you have any questions, ask directly. And then we'll move with Laurent. And again, we'll have a Q&A. And for the remaining time, we'll have a discussion with all of us. So Oana, thanks for joining us. Please introduce yourself briefly. And
very good to be here. So I'm just going to put this big hello sign next to myself so that you know that I'm friendly. So I am very friendly. And actually, after this session, you're absolutely free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions that might come up here or that just come up later that have to do with innovation. Thank you, Jan, for the invitation. And Laurent, very nice to meet you through this medium. So why I'm here today is because I'm also battling with this existential question every day. And that question is, how do you nudge a large, complex organization to become more innovative? And clearly, there are a lot of ways of doing that. But one of the ways in which I systematically help do that is by providing a platform, or let's say just a single source of truth for those organizations. So that's the world in which I live. And even more than that, it's not only about nudging them to do certain things, but it's all about helping them connect the dots and innovate within a community. So not only internally, but also plugging in external resources. So that's also a little bit Laurent's area, because my customers, they also collaborate very much with different startups or scale-ups or institutions or consumers and so on. So that's a little bit my world. And frequently what happens is something that's a little bit like this. And I wanted to make it funny because I think it is funny. And some leaders don't think it is. But when you think about what you think you do and what you actually do in innovation management, you can have different perspectives on that. And quite frequently, the image is a little bit static. So you think, okay, well, I'm churning out a lot of products and services, and then every day I'm incrementally advancing my field a little bit. So it can be like you see here with the computer programmer, but it could also be that you have different facets to it, and then it looks a little bit more like this. So each of your stakeholder groups sees something a little bit different. So depending on the touch points that they have with you. So we all want to be Dr. House, right, in this picture, like what you think doctors do, but we're not always there. We're not always witty and super professional and understand what the issue is at the end of the day. Sometimes, we're just drowning in paperwork and in the data that we help collect. And I think this goes a little bit to the fundamental problem that you see, because it's not really about the lack of will to have a stable or a solid innovation management capability. It's more about, I think it's the lack of governance or ownership, or more kind of the people side, at least from the way I see things. So I think it's kind of interesting to keep that in mind. But maybe even more so, one of the first discussions that I have with my customers before they even log in anywhere, or whether we connect through SSO to their database, we talk about why would you bother? So why would you start professionalizing your efforts, and why would you want to go through with that? Because it does require quite a significant investment, and you're not always sure what you get at the end of the day. And hopefully by the end of kind of this mini talk, and also at the end of our session, you'll understand that that's actually quite crucial. So that it's actually worth it, and the steps are actually quite crucial. And just resting on this theme for a little bit, I often hear three words, or three terms. One of them is to professionalize your innovation activity, which means, or it can mean a lot of things, but usually what it means is that we're not just going to rely on rumors anymore, or on personal networks. We're going to go out and we're going to scout for our startups in a proper way. We're going to use algorithms. We're going to use some kind of more sophisticated evaluation mechanism. We're going to rely on industry reports, or we're going to run a survey. So we're not going to base our judgment on gut feel. We're going to try and be a little bit more scientific, let's say, about it. So that's what I hear sort of in the realm of professionalize. But there's also this other field with institutionalize. And with institutionalize, what it usually means is that we put the responsible in place. So we put a person in charge of the innovation program, or we name a team, we have a lab, maybe we outsource some of the work, but for sure there is a structure, and there are some processes, maybe some kind of stage gate process that we cook up. And then that helps us achieve our goals, or hopefully that helps us achieve our goals. And there's also another one that I hear quite a bit, which is the part with to democratize. And this is mostly, well, this comes from sort of Eric von Hippel's work. So this usually has to do with user-centric centered innovation, and with sort of the open source movement. But I think it's still about making sure that the important voices are incorporated in a kind of sustained way into your decision making. So of course, we want to achieve good results, and we want to get there, but there's always the fear that whether you professionalize or institutionalize or democratize or whatever you do, you lose the creative spark, or you lose something that is fundamentally important to innovation. And what I actually see is that the contrary happens. So, and maybe, also it depends what people mean with innovation, but if you want sustained results, if you want every year or every quarter to have something new to offer, or something that advances your field, you cannot do that by relying on serendipity, right? You need a way to channel all that knowledge and all that information. You need incentive schemes. You need people who are there to guide other colleagues. So like a mentorship program, for example. So there are a lot of pieces that need to go into it. And that adds predictability. That makes sure that your ROI is high, and usually management is also happy at the end of the day. So I think one of the kind of most common pitfalls that people can fall into in this space is that they think, well, if we just do a large marketing campaign and, we all wear our innovation socks. Here I have a Starry Night socks for you. We will suddenly be very, very good at what we do. So this is a little bit like taking the easy way out. I think this might indeed spur creativity, and it might be very exciting, and it might help people sort of join in, but it's definitely not the kind of activity that provides you with that consistency. And I'm not saying that sort of platform or a tool will solve all the problems, but I think it clearly has more advantages than something like this. And the thing is that platforms, whatever shape or form they come in, for example, a partner relationship management program, or something about continuous improvement, change management. So we're moving to a different business model. We have a merger, an acquisition. So whatever is behind the platform, that doesn't really matter. What matters most is that there is kind of a clear path from A to B, and there are clear responsibilities. And this is actually a snapshot of the organizations that have such processes in place. I've also prepared sort of two examples for you. But I think what is interesting is that while not all of them might agree on what that stage gate looks like, and an inventor relations program like the one Mattel has, it's clearly differently structured than a program that Bosch has, for example, for all their colleagues. So maybe more of an idea management scheme. But it all leads to a result, and it's all part of the day-to-day routine. It's not disconnected. It's something there that helps. It helps keep people focused, and also helps create that predictability, as I said. And the way I see sort of platforms really contributing to this angle, so keeping the innovation wheel kind of spinning, and it's funny because this is also kind of a wheel shaped, is in sort of several areas. So a platform can have multiple functions, but and it can also help and achieve several things. And the main one that I see platforms being utilized for is actually idea generation. So an idea platform, or a way to collect ideas, is kind of universally applicable mechanism. You are crowdsourcing solutions, either internally or with the help of externals, in order to solve a particular problem. It's quite easy to set up. It provides a very, very solid groundwork, and it helps you do things at scale. But you could also do a number of other things on a platform, or again, through other mechanisms. One use case that is recently trending is one related to a partner engagement. For example, things like, as I said before, partner relationship management. So Siemens has a very nice program now put in place. So programs that might even replace completely a booth or something that you might have in a traditional setting. So people can send in a more unannounced way their proposals to you, and then you can take those proposals and see whether there's something that you can incorporate into your supply chain. And then kind of two other things. There are the projects. So you could run on a platform. A platform is very good because you can view very well the progress of certain projects, and you also have the strategy building piece. And into each of these, you can weave, or you can create them in a way that preserves sort of the fun and sort of the innovative spirit. But that's all up to the designer and to the way you create it. And let me just show you what those things can actually look like. So for example, one of the programs that I've been involved in and that I thought was quite unique because it was a competitive setting. So they were, the participants were both competing against each other, but they were also cooperating to some extent, has to do with the Reimagining Fundraising challenge. This was designed for the INGO sector, so the international non-governmental organizations. What they did is they came together, 14 of them to be exact, some of the most prominent, by the way, out there. They came together, and they did so because they realized that creating a joint innovation capability is more effective than them kind of single-handedly trying to understand the future of fundraising, or what technologies could they bring to make their work more effective. This was a very, very interesting scenario. So despite the fact that it was sort of in an institutionalized fashion, you did have a platform, you did have rules, you did have responsibilities, there was a time frame, you couldn't just apply out of the blue, there was screening. But at the end of the day, the results were tangible, they were very exciting, they were most of them unknown to the organizations, and they helped build a very solid community. This is freely accessible, by the way. So if you look for it, you can find it. You can also download the manifesto, which I think spells out quite well what the advantages of creating this setting are. And just to wrap up, because I don't even know how many, maybe I just have a few more minutes. I wanted to show you another example, which is quite different because it's more related to sort of a public organization. And this is the European Space Agency's Open Space Innovation Platform. So that's what it's called. And this platform was set up in order to boost actually innovation, to bring together individuals, businesses, of course, schools and institutions, generally people who are very passionate about space research, to help them pitch solutions to ESA. And then ESA might invite them to be part of or they might jointly apply for a grant. Some of these ideas might be incorporated into the next space mission. So a very easy and kind of, well, not easy, but kind of a fun, transparent way in which you can foster innovation. So I think that the threat of this being ending up being like a like a submission of proposals to the Horizon 2020 program was dismissed the minute that feedback started coming in and when you kind of would see the interaction between the participants under each idea. So from my standpoint, these methodologies are quite promising. I don't think they stifle really innovation. They enhance it, they provide for that structure that you always need. And as a result, you can also measure what you do. You can measure how far you are. So I think this is the conclusion that I got to in the past years. And yeah, I look forward to debating that with you, because if you have a different opinion, then I would actually be very interested finding out. So thank you. That's what I had to say.
Thank you, Oana, for the great introduction. I would like to invite the guests, if they have any questions, to just ask the questions. And in the meantime, maybe I'll warm up with one. Oana, I'm not from my own work. I believe Hype started with an idea management platform, right? If I'm not wrong, and then they evolved into other solutions.
Yeah, it was actually a project management solution. Yeah, it came from the automotive industry. That's right.
Okay, so I've seen some companies complaining that this idea management works great, because you have a great engagement, you have lots of ideas, but actually the company realizes they lack the transforming an idea or a challenge into a prototype ready to go to market.
Right.
How do you address the other part of the process, which I think is a missing skill in lots of companies?
Yeah, definitely. That is always a huge problem. So the fuzzy front end, of course, is always much more attractive than sort of the other part, which requires the conversion to a real solution. The way we try to handle it is by being proactive, at least in the projects in which I'm involved in. What we try and do from the beginning is to form teams. So what we do is that we don't kick off a project before we have an overview of the entire process. We don't just design idea campaigns, for example, or channels, but we actually think about the idea submission form. We talk about the evaluation aspects. We talk about concepting, about projects. And this is important because I think it helps them realize whether they should get started or not. We also talk to them about what you just said, Johan. So kind of the impact that not implementing anything has on the credibility of the program. Personally, I think this is one of the biggest losses that you can incur. Having a bank of, I don't know, possibly thousands of ideas, depends which organization you are within, but this is one way. Now, what we also do is that we try to recommend partnering up in order to implement the ideas. So sometimes organizations cannot and should not do that themselves. They don't have the capacity. So we actually recommend that they outsource this function. So we ask them to collaborate with, for example, labs or consultancies, depending, of course, on what kind of implementation is required. We invite them to do tests to see if there is actually anything valuable, because of course you can have all these ideas, but you're never sure at the end of the day if you should invest in them. So we suggest a program whereby they would do this sequentially and always kind of monitoring the results So I think these are some of the kind of the general recommendations, but clearly, you know, it always happens that nothing is, or not everything is pursued. Now, one other thing that helps, and this might sound a little bit strange, but when you have a large set of ideas and a lot of enthusiastic people joining you and you realize that you cannot implement them, what we also recommend is that you communicate about it so that you are actually quite transparent about the process. You actually offering just an overview of the solutions and of the status sometimes is actually quite good and enough, and people will have understanding, and then you move on. And sort of as a last resort, what you can always do is more this, well, not a last resort, but it's a bit more uncommon. If you see that you have a lot of promising ideas on your shelf, you might do the inside out piece of open innovation, and then you open it up. So you build a gallery with 9 Sigma, for example, or other providers. And then you see whether that idea could find a business model elsewhere. So you still valorize it, but maybe not fully internally. You might try to find something elsewhere. So there are different options that you can have.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah. Any question from the participants?
Yeah, don't be shy.
If not, I have another one. I'm very curious.
Yeah, good, just go ahead.
So for the participants, I know Oana since 2013. You were in Sweden at the time, right? With innovation.
It was, yeah, that's right. I was in Sweden.
My question, how do you see in your experience companies developing their own internal innovation capabilities? How do you see the evolution of that? And you know, is having innovation governance required to implement your solutions, or the platform is a replacement for that?
Yeah, no, I think, you know, there's this expression that if you build it, they will come. Not really. So we also have run into situations where you build a platform and there's actually no one joining because no one knows the purpose of being there. So there's no, well, first of all, there's no maybe marketing, but there's no figurehead. There's not a person joining. I would say that back in 2013, when we were connecting and when I was trying to advertise for the power of innovation management, I don't think it was that well, it was common in the very large organizations, but now I see it trickle down also to the smaller ones. So you even see it in SMEs. You see them taking charge and building mini programs or experimenting, naming people in charge of innovation. So I think the vocabulary is more, well, the notions are more known. And there are also so many case studies that you can read through today from different industries that it's quite easy to find something that matches your current status. So I would think that maybe through some of our work and also others' work, we managed to make this a bit more mainstream than it used to be. So, for example, I remember that we had an engagement with Improve Academy. Maybe you remember Improve Academy. So they offered this questionnaire that any small or medium-sized organization could take, and then they could assess their capabilities. And one of the elements of that questionnaire was governance. And that's actually one of the strongest predictors of the success of a program, whether or not there's a platform in place. We also had this in university. We had a course around corporate failure and turnaround, and there was one opinion that it was always management that was not at fault, but there was something wrong in the way that things were managed or mismanaged. So there was no one there to guide the process. So I cannot stress that enough. There needs to be a responsible, but also someone that has some kind of vision over it. And you see this in surveys, you see this in articles, and you see this in the way that organizations behave. So I think that right now, also through the programs of the European Union, I think this is becoming more and more prominent. And I think that's good news. Not to mention the standards. So there are innovation management standards now finally approved. I know that in 2013, they were still debating them, but now you can actually get a certification for that, which I think speaks precisely to this aspect. So we are really getting there. It's really taken seriously. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, Oana. I don't see any raised hands, so maybe if there are questions for you, we could take them at the end. So let's pass it to Laurent. and see a different approach to innovation from the wide range of innovation activities a company could take. Laurent, what are you focusing on?
Let me first share my screen. Okay, share. Okay, can you see it now?
Yep, it's all good.
I guess so. Okay, thank you, Johan. Oana, your presentation was very inspiring. On my side, I will focus on the earlier step, up the road, and talk about the innovation supply chain and how to industrialize this innovation supply chain using technology. But my experience in the field of innovation comes from my quite long time as an entrepreneur, a tech entrepreneur. I'm not an innovation consultant, and I don't work for a large company, even though I have practiced innovation from the ground up in startups. So I started my entrepreneurship journey back in 2000, and since then I launched or was involved in the launch of about 15 startup projects. Some of them were only attempts, but a few of them were, let's say, a success. So a couple of them were acquired by larger companies or corporations. But the common point is that every one of them involved somehow a technology considered as emerging at the time, then involving innovation in some sort. So we had to design a value proposition around a new technology that could bring added value to the B2B sector. So for 20 years, I have evolved at the crossroad of entrepreneurship, technology, innovation, and corporate venturing. And one of them, Swan, was active in the big data, artificial intelligence area in the sales and marketing domain. And it was acquired in 2017 by the Business Group, headquartered in Stockholm, and recently itself acquired by Dun & Bradstreet. And it's maybe the foundation of what we're currently doing with Novable. Because after the acquisition, part of the deal, I held a management position in Stockholm with the responsibility, among other things, of identifying startups around the world that could feed the transformation strategy of Bisnode as a group. And I noticed at the time that there was no methodology and even less technology to source or to scout innovative startups to do that, even if it was considered as critical in group strategy. So something that was critical in the innovation was done with no innovation at all. And so we were relying on opportunity, serendipity, and network. So I had the idea to use AI that we used to develop with Swan on the innovation scouting domain using advanced data science techniques for startup scouting. So in order to bring intelligence and automation in a more and more important aspect of corporate innovation. And then Novable was born. And so corporate venturing is not new. So we're not creating a new domain. It dates back to the 80s. But if you have a quick look back, you see that on the intelligence ladder, most of the companies we've met and we're still meeting still rely on a first 3 steps. So you wait for the opportunity, you mobilize your network, or, and most of them do that, you use databases. Databases like this one, Crunchbase, PitchBook, CB Insights, you name it. You find plenty of data in those databases. However, I think there are 3 major flaws or limitations for corporate innovation. It's very useful for VC, but for strategic investments, or external innovation activities, it's less useful. It's useless. Why? Because first of all, the data you find there is mostly financial. It's firmographics. And when you are a company with a strategic perspective, you need more than that. You need information about the actual startup activity, methodology, technology, models, maturity. Second, it's a search engine. So you use keywords, and by design, a keyword reduces reality. So it can never reflect the complexity and nuances of your innovation strategy, which is your DNA. And it links to the third limitation, is that it's a one-size-fits-all solution. Now, if your direct competitor submits the very same keywords, he will have the very same results than you, but you're unique. So as a result, you have in the companies we've met, analysts spending hundreds, if not thousands of hours analyzing and disqualifying bad candidates. And this is what we have called the SAT syndrome, not only because it's sad, but also because it refers to spot, analyze, and drop, and repeat. So this syndrome quickly became the enemy we had to fight in this area, and the reason why Novable exists. So we need a bit of technology to do that. You know, databases, I believe, are missing the very point that makes sense, and is the fact that startups are not just entities fixed in time with a name and a website. You know, behind each startup, you have founders, employees, investors, suppliers, stakeholders, and they also produce conversations. They produce content on their social feed, on their website, on their blogs. So they are living nodes in a dynamic network. So the starting point for innovation scouting, in my view, is therefore to be able to both capturing this network to create a context that will increase the matching quality, but also capturing the movie rather than the photography, because, you know, startups are born and evolve and die very quickly. So we use AI and especially NLP, natural language processing, to let the machine understand the content from startups, so the context, but also the content from companies, there's the strategies and the briefings. So the idea is to brief the computer just like you would brief a human being, a consultant in a meeting room. So we want to brief, to bring the best of the two, so a database level reach with a human level quality. And this brings a couple of clear benefits for analysts. The first being that we switch from a long list of common results to a personalized ranking. The first candidates of the ranking will be the ones that the computer considers as the most relevant against your briefing. So sorted by their semantic proximity with the briefing you submitted. And that is possible because the briefing was submitted as a natural language with all its nuances. So because keywords reduces the reality. And keywords cannot be that accurate when it comes to matching. Another benefit is that AI doesn't care about industries and segments. As it comes from the ground up, it will find innovation where it is and go beyond the natural tendencies that we have to stick to our own industry. And all in all, it brings better results with much less time to reach the required quality. And it's also permanent monitoring because, you know, AI works 24/7 and updates events as they occur. So how would it look like from the user's perspective? Well, he receives what we call a golden basket, ranked on the basis of the semantic proximity from top to bottom. So the first one will be the most relevant and down the road. So instead of having a search field where you would submit keywords in, you have a plain text area where you can input your innovation strategy in a natural language, and it can be as long as you want. And the briefing feeds the technology, who analyzes the input in real time, identifies the topics in it, and suggests additional or surrounding topic likely to improve the quality of the search. And a second magical moment, magical step, is that this AI not only identifies topics, but also can group them in clusters and identifies a relative weighting for all of them or for each of them. And you can, if you want, modify this weighting to be the closest possible to what you had in mind, and that the text maybe did not reflect in the first place. So in a nutshell, the technology is now able to replace the intelligence of a human being consultant or analyst who would process your input the very same way until the very end, not the final step, as we will see. And you can use such technology for different corporate venturing use cases, from landscape monitoring, competitive analysis, to CVC or M&A, or just to find the most suitable partner to launch a new product or simply to fix a problem. We have a customer, which is a big hospital, in Belgium, and they use Novable to find a mobility startup able to fix a parking congestion issue, because there are too many cars in there and they can't fix it since 10 years. And they want just to use Novable to find something to fix this specific problem. Another example, we have a food and beverages customer who is using Novable to find innovation in the materials and packaging industry, and not in the food and beverages, because they identified that their next innovation would come from the eco-responsible packaging and some sort. A third example, maybe we have an energy company as customers using Novable as a radar to be sure to be notified of any new innovative initiative in a series of specific domains, to be sure to keep the grasp with innovations worldwide and get inspired. As a conclusion, does AI help industrializing innovation? My answer would be yes, because it can at least automate the innovation supply chain. So we can now delegate to the machine 80% of the process. We delegate the low value tasks and steps that can be taken over by the computer. And as I said, the computer is working 24/7, is never out, never tired, never sick, and delivers results in a matter of seconds. So while keeping the final cut to the human brain, the real added value step remains, of course, for the natural intelligence. I think I am at 10 minutes, right? So thank you.
Okay, yeah, spot on, indeed. Thank you, Laurent. Very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Let's see if we have any early questions from the participants.
I'm sure you have some in your pocket.
Well, it's mainly our curiosity pushed us to invite you to the event, basically. Maybe until we wait for some questions, I was about to ask you, what is your typical customer profile? But then I saw you have different types of campaigns, right? Some users are looking for trends in the industry. Others are looking for startups to provide the technical support, for example, for executing an idea, while others are looking for startups to buy.
We have two main target audiences, I'd say. The first and the most important ones are all innovation-related professionals, so head of innovation, innovation managers, R&D managers, etc. on one side, and those are using Novable to monitor the innovation landscape ahead, to be informed of what's cooking up out there, to be inspired. So it's rather permanent campaigns, or to find startups or innovations to partner with. So this is the first part, and the second target group is all professionals related with corporate development, so CVC, M&A, and sometimes business development in smaller companies. And they use Novable for two other use cases. The first, finding startups in which to invest through a corporate venture capital fund, or to acquire for a strategic and purpose as a speedboat. So those are the two main kinds of users.
Okay. And I was thinking of for the venture capital firms. Clearly, they spend a lot of time scouting for the right companies to buy, right? Is this is the platform just providing the right targets, or also it does some necessary work with I don't know,
so
profiling?
First, the investment funds and the venture capital industry is not the primary target for us, because usually they use databases with a lot of financial information in them, and they're okay they are good with that. Our primary target are large companies and corporations who run corporate venturing activities. So for which the strategic aspect, the strategic perspective is really important, and for which they would need information that they can't find in startup databases. Even if we provide some financials and some firmographics coming with that, but our primary goal is to provide contextual information about the real activity of the startup. So we first focus on the industry, on the B2B side of it. Even if we have a couple of investment funds using Novable as a smart companion to those databases, just to complement their deal flow with some new ideas next to their network. They strongly rely on networks, and next to their existing tools, they add Novable to that, but it's not the primary target. And for them, we just delivers startup names or ideas they wouldn't have thought about, and then they take those startups and they do their own due diligence work on their side using their working tool that they usually use. But it's not the most prominent part of our customers.
Thank you. Okay, since also we're hopefully get some questions from the participants, do you see any industries that are more inclined to take on such a solution?
Yeah, we have analyzed data from a lot of sources, and we came to the conclusion that we have identified 4 industries that are mostly likely to use tools like Novable because their corporate venturing activities is more intense, and they are finance, banking, and insurance, of course, energy, healthcare, and food and beverages. And how did we identify those 4? Basically, analyzing the number of startup collaboration, acquisition, and also there were customers from those 4 industries are also customers from our competitors. So we have just mixed a couple of sources to reach a conclusion, and then we, as a result, we make some choice based on those 4 industries in the data collection, in our marketing, of course, also, and in the way we display information on the UX interface on the platform. So it has some impact on any component of the product and on the company also. It doesn't mean that we don't work for other industries than those 4, but we put a slight focus on them because they are more receptive globally. But it's not a scientific conclusion. It's just an empirical intuition based on data, but also on our intuition.
Yeah. Maybe, Laurent, I can also add something to this. In the previous years, I was also in touch with other industries like media or the music industry. And I think they're also changing quite a bit. So it wasn't very common for them to acquire startups or to think about technology transfer from universities. But I think that's intensifying quite a bit. And I can definitely see how solutions like yours contribute to that growth. And yeah.
I agree. The media industry doesn't come far behind the 4 I mentioned. Even in Belgium here, you have you had some recent events gathering media startups to just inspire the big TV networks, etc. So indeed, it is changing. The same with the advertising industry and
right.
The marketing agencies. They're also very keen to that, not especially in the purpose of acquiring startups or what, but just to be sure that they are aware of new technologies and new methodologies that is happening in their field of expertise, because they are just serving customers and they have to be aware of that. There is a company called MindDiad who is doing exactly that. So kind of innovation scouting for the marketing and advertising industry in this very specific use case. So
yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's very interesting. And the main challenge that I see is actually that handoff point. So from the moment that you have your list or you understand the landscape to, first of all, contacting, I guess, those startups, and then also so maybe incorporating them. So finding, the operational fit, the strategic fit, the chemistry fit. I think there is so much work that goes into that as
Yeah,
well.
I totally agree, and it's a very wide domain.
Yeah.
So we have to stay focused. So we decided to focus on what we can do and what we know can do better than others, which is the tech part of it. When it comes to innovation management consulting, you have a lot of people, including you, out there who are much better than we can ever be. But what we can do is leveraging technology in the first step of it all. So we're not consultants, etc. But we are very aware of the importance of putting a tool in the engagement point. If we just provide data, maybe it will not be enough. So what we do with Novable is to offer what we call some engagement options, some deep dive analysis that we can do on behalf of customers, or we work with partner for small due diligence, cultural fit tests, startup valuations, everything that could help our customers to make their decision making easier, even contacting the startup on their behalf, so that they can stay anonymous. And so that's very important, and things like that. But it will be done by partners or by ourselves if we can automate it. But we want to stay focused on the tech part and on the product side of it. But you're right, innovation is first and foremost a matter of collaboration, interaction between people. We know that for sure, and this is why we have focus
on your niche there. Yeah, no, and I completely see how that works. And a fun fact is that we've also incorporated some of this kind of technology into platforms recently. So yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, with some acquisitions, because we realized that there's no way around it. So that it's a fundamental need, and we might as well partner with those that can provide that need. So for example, with organizations like Mapg or InnoSpot, or recently with Vima, that also offers kind of a lightweight solution, right? And including going beyond that. So also working internally on algorithms that can go through ideas and do, language analysis and figure out, for example, the sentiment of the submissions.
Exactly.
Are they positive, negative? Which type of idea is more likely to be selected for implementation? Is there anything that we could tell the submitters, that would improve their performance? If we run hackathons, how do we optimize those? It's quite rich.
It's interesting because it can go in a lot of directions. For now, we are considering that the startup as a company, as an entity, or as a project is the starting point. But we could run the same kind of technology on another body corpus text. If we run the technology on patents, for instance, or in specialized press, etc., you would have other kind of results that could complement that. So I think that this is why we call ourselves innovation scouter more than startup scouting partner, because innovation is not only in a startup, but in any contextual activity that you have around that. So it's a starting point.
For sure. Yeah.
We have a question from Nicola on the chat, so I'll read it aloud. Laurent, at which stage do you put the startups on the radar? Starting with the seed round or only Series A to be solid enough for corporates to trust? What is corporate venturing good practice from this point of view?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would answer that it depends on the use case, but one of the first challenges that we had was to identify automatically if a startup was a company first, and then was an innovative company, was still active, and still operating. Okay, so when we have passed those 4 filters, then okay, you are eligible to enter a database and be vectorized, and etc. We have 1.2 million companies in database at any stage, any maturity stage, from even before being incorporated. You know, it's just a project, until more than scale-ups, even, let's say, medium-sized companies, because depending on who you are and who your use case is, you may need something very early stage because you want to maybe pay less or buy a specific technology before your competitor, or you need to manage your organic growth and buy a bigger company because you just want more market shares. So it depends on the use case. If you take the simple monitoring case, you don't especially care about the maturity stage, and you don't speak about seed round or Series A, because you just need ideas, inspiration, and be notified about any event that matters to you. And an event can happen in a medium-sized company launching a new product. This is also innovation. So this is why innovation is not equal to startup, but startup is a good starting point on top of being a good marketing term when you have to commercialize your platform. So the maturity is important, but I'd say at the second step. So when you have your golden basket, often our customers need to filter the results on different firmographic criteria, and the maturity stage is one of them. But we don't use that in the first matching, because it doesn't make sense, because we match on the content and not on the firmographic. So I hope the answer was clear, Nicolas.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Or Laurent, do you have a question for Oana, or vice versa?
Not especially, because I haven't had the chance to meet all of them. But thank you for listening.
Johan, maybe just a quick anecdote. You know, while Laurent was speaking, I could not help but think about something that I read recently. I think it was in one of the issues of The Economist, and they were talking about Grammarly. You might know it because it pops up everywhere. So on Facebook, and it was talking about why Grammarly is good, but that after a certain point is actually stifling innovation. Innovation meaning people's ability to come up with new words or phrases. And that's because it somehow always brings you on the right track. And I was just curious about Laurent's view about, you know, we program AI to work in a certain way, but how do we update it? How do you fine tune the algorithm over time?
Yeah, we have developed, I would say, libraries, even if it's not the right term, but I'm not a data scientist myself, but I know that we have trained our AI on a set of terminology and words related to innovation and startups in particular. And of course, since we vectorize, I don't know how many startups a day on a permanent basis, we collect the website content, the social feeds, the founder's profile, everything that we can grab legally, of course. And all this is the raw material for the AI to train. And with NLP algorithms, we are able to identify recurrent terms, and link them to their semantic proximity, and with representation learning, etc. You can surface out those terms, which of course are used in a feedback loop in the matching process. So it's a continuous improvement. The more startup we have, the better we speak the startup language. Same for innovations, same for technology, and same for the 4 industries that I was talking about. So you're right. It's always a matter of training. You train.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you for that. So great answer.
Okay, maybe one more question from me. For both of you, what is your impression? I asked about Laurent about industries, but what about geographies? Where do you see more companies from which regions on the globe investing in innovation, and of course in your part of the innovation is your services.
Oana, you first.
Sure. Well, of course, there's always growth in the traditional areas. So you also see sort of the Western world and the Americas. But I see actually South America growing quite prominently. And what has been a very pleasant surprise for me has been the Middle East. So I've been working on several very interesting projects in the Middle East, including with public as well as private organizations. And I'm thrilled that there is thought given to this kind of process in those areas. And it's not so much, I think they're not necessarily at the stage where they would talk so much about startups and scale-ups and incorporating those, but they're thinking about professionalizing their efforts in some way. And it's interesting to watch that journey, especially given sort of the cultural aspects as well. And the history of those places.
For my part, our commercial reach for now is Europe. So I can tell you about the other continents, even if we have some spontaneous contacts from South Africa, United States, LATAM, as you said. But when it comes to startups themselves, since we grow them, we are quite surprised on the speed in which new startups pop up in South America, Middle East, and of course, Southeast Asia. It's more difficult to grab the startups from Africa, even though I know it's also boiling there. And of course, if you have a boiling startup ecosystems in a region, you will by definition have an innovation ecosystem as a whole and a corporate venturing activity around it that will eventually rise. But I can tell you that with real figures, because for now we are just prospecting Europe, and it's already a big market to tackle.
Yeah, and maybe one more aspect about us or about our work. Generally, we work with very, very large multinational organizations, so it's also a little bit difficult to place them. So they might have headquarters in one country, but sometimes they operate in 4 or 5 countries using the same platform. So, or maybe in 20. So that's a bit difficult, but I still stick to those 2 geographies. And speaking of Africa, we ran the first hackathon in Africa during COVID. That was also quite an experience. So in Togo, to be precise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So it was the Tous contre Corona initiative. So yeah.
Cool.
Also very exciting. So we're working now or I'm working with a colleague of mine on an academic study about it, because we think it's quite unique.
You went there yourself?
No, unfortunately, no. We had to do everything remote, but we're really hoping to be able to visit Lomé at some point to talk to the organizations that were involved.
It's the way to go.
Yeah. And they're all receiving. So they're all, for example, this hackathon was inspired by the one in Estonia, by the EU versus virus hackathon. So everybody's learning, and despite the very low digital literacy levels, there are ways to bring those people in, to find the inventors, the local inventors, to pull in scarce resources, to get an internet cafe to sponsor your hackathon. It's incredible. I don't know how else to describe it, but there's so much resourcefulness, and I'm glad that we can finally hear about it, because maybe in the past it was more difficult to learn. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. I think we should stop here in the interest of time. If you have any other questions for Oana and Laurent, you can reach out to them. You can initiate a discussion. If you don't have their contacts, you could get it from us, but I think you have their LinkedIn profiles as well. Also, please stay in touch with our club's activity. I just posted the link to our LinkedIn group and the website INSEADalumni.be, where we have a description of the club with the contacts. So please get in touch to suggest topics of interest, but also if you need the contacts of Oana and Laurent to continue your conversations. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you, Oana and Laurent, for being so nice and sharing your experience. It's a great discussion, and let's stay close.
Great. Thank you, Johan, for the organization and invitation.
Definitely. I second that. Thank you, Johan. Thank you, Laurent. Pleasure to be here. And thanks everybody for listening. So we hope you got something out of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a great evening, everybody. Bye-bye.